ASMR channel. So, tonight I am going to be reading some creepy stories from Reddit again. It is after midnight once again, and I love reading these stories. I was actually just creeping myself out before I started filming. So, I'm going to be reading 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 stories again. I have one from the No Sleep forum, so I think that this one is true. If I remember correctly, the original poster posted it to Let's Not Meet first, and then the other 2 are also from Let's Not Meet. That's my favorite forum. So let me just jump right in. The first story that I'm going to be reading to you, a lot of you might have heard it before. It's a good one. It's one of my favorites. It's called The Smiling Man. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommates that even the drug dealers in the city were polite, but all of that changed in just a few minutes one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park, quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Decided he was probably drunk. I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open, wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point, I ran away, or pulled out my pepper spray, or my cell phone, or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen, as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, and still looking at the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone, but what came out was a whimper. What the fuck? Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dance walking away. Just like that, not wanting to turn my back to him again. I just watched him go until he was far enough away, almost to be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't dancing anymore, and he wasn't moving away from me. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time, he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that has always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane, and that's a very, very scary thing to see. I think I would shit myself. And that is why I don't go on walks alone or at night. That one creeps me the hell out. The next one, and that last one was posted by a user named blue_title. The next one was posted by a user called ligamentary, and it's called, in quotes, "He asked for my name. Yes. Call 911. I have never seen him in my life." I was watching my daughter's kids while she and her husband went out of town. They have a teenage daughter. Let's say her name is Alyssa. It's like 3 a.m., and I'm woken up by a weird rustling sound and look out the window to see movement. I saw a boy emerge from the bushes on the side of the house. I saw a bike tossed on the lawn that definitely wasn't ours. My first thought was that it was a burglar casing houses, but since he looked young and came through on a bike, I figured scaring him straight would be enough for him to decide to head home. Didn't want to ruin a teenager's life by calling the cops straight away. So I went out on the porch, flipped the lights on, and said, "Can I help you?" in my classroom voice. The guy looked surprised, but not nervous. He was wearing American-style jacket, but once I got a more clear view of him in the street lights, he seemed much older than my granddaughter, gruff and more wiry than athletic. I would have not been able to ignore that hair. Okay, anyway. He walked up closer to the house and said, "Yeah, I'm looking for Alyssa." I gave him a disapproving glare, hoping he'd realize he came for a girl late at night, and a grumpy old person answered, "It's time to split." I'm thinking what must have happened is Alyssa knew her parents were going out of town, and maybe before she knew I'd be staying over, told a secret older boyfriend to come over. It was late and I was alone with several kids, so I didn't want him coming any closer to the house. I also thought it was weird he came so late and wanted to be sure Alyssa actually wanted to talk to him. So I said, "I'm sorry, who?" And he said, "Alyssa. You know, Alyssa, last name. This is her house." I thought he knew her full name. They must at least be friends. I said, "You wait here." He started to walk up, and I felt a sick burning in my gut. Instinct kicked in. I yelled, "No, stop, freeze," then readjusted and said, "You stay right here. This is private property. Don't take a step closer. Wait there." So I go in, and Alyssa is asleep just one room over from where the rustling first occurred, and I wake her up and say something to the effect of, "I don't know what the big idea was to have friends over this time of night, but you need to tell them to go home." She has no clue what I'm talking about. I say, "There's a guy outside asking for you." Confused, she gets up and goes to the window. She sees him and goes white as a sheet. "He asked for me." "Yes." "By name?" "Yes." "Call the police. I have never seen him in my life." I called 911 immediately, but as soon as I was on the phone with them, Alyssa started tugging at my arm. "He's coming up." I had younger kids in the house to think about, so I kept the door latched and pulled it just open enough for the latch and yelled. I asked my husband, and none of us know an Alyssa last name. "Leave my property or I'm calling 911. He got angry and started yelling for her to come out. Thankfully, the police came quickly, and when he heard the sirens, he grabbed the bike and ran off. I watched where he was running, and he jumped into the passenger side of a car without headlights or front plates and sped off. The police followed in the same direction once I pointed them, but they didn't get him. They advised us to take all our social medias offline if she was sure she didn't know who this person was, and said they'd had a couple similar reports recently and were looking into it. I got a heavy-duty lock, and she slept in my room for the remainder of my visit. That is so scary. I can't imagine, like, being the grandmother and being like, "Hey, your friend, he's out here, like, asking for you, tell him to leave." And then hearing her say, "I have never seen this man in my life. Like, call the police." I can't imagine the panic and, like, fear in her voice when she said that, because I'm sure that she was, like, scared to death. And now she said that he jumped into a car that didn't have headlights on or plates. Obviously sketchy. I just wonder what his intentions were. It's a good thing they didn't find out, because I'm sure they weren't good. surprised by a poster named Staring Void. And this one is called Someone Broke Into My House and Tried to Find Me. A few years ago, I was renting a house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside the suburbs. It seemed like the perfect balance of having space and having nice neighbors, close enough not to feel isolated. The area had no street lights, so it was very, very dark at night, especially if there were clouds blocking the moonlight. It didn't bother me though. It made my little house feel even more quaint on dark nights. I got home from work one day in midwinter. It was a cloudy night, so pulling up to my house, I saw only what my headlights and front porch light illuminated. When I got out of my car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. That was odd, as I had never smelled that before around the house. I didn't see anyone nearby, so I ignored it and went inside. I had just gotten off a shift with a few hours of overtime, so I felt pretty tired. Even though it wasn't even 7 yet, I decided to take a shower and call it a night. I woke up sometime later, sure that I had heard a noise inside my house. I wasn't worried right away, because my friend would sometimes stop by to use my shower after work on his way to his night classes. I even gave him a spare key so he could stop by, even if I wasn't home. He would always text me to let me know beforehand, though, and I hadn't heard my phone go off. I reached over to my bedside table and picked up my cell phone to see if my friend had sent me a text. The bright light from my phone screen and number pad blinded me. These were the days before phones had a light sensor that would dim the screen in the dark, and this particular phone was so bright I could use it as a flashlight. Through squinted eyes, I could make out that it was 9 something, but I couldn't tell if I had an unread text or not. I set my phone aside and called out my friend's name. There were a couple of seconds of silence before I heard loud footfalls as someone started running through the bottom floor of my house. I leapt out of bed and ran to the closet. They were already up the stairs by the time I had opened the door and stepped inside. That house had 3 rooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms on either side of the hallway, the one I was in, and a spare, and a bathroom at the end. The bedroom doors were both closed, but the bathroom door was cracked open. I heard whoever was in my house thunder down the hallway past my door and into the bathroom. Thank God he did. That gave me enough time to open the attic access in the ceiling of my closet and hoist myself up. I had just started to lift myself up when the person ran back out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside of the attic when my bedroom door burst open. I heard footsteps run into my room and stop. When they didn't see me in the room, they ran back to the hallway and into the other room, which just had boxes stacked in the corner, some weights, and a table where I painted my miniature models. I guess they decided that if someone were hiding, it would be in the bedroom because they charged back into my room and turned on the light. A moment later, the closet door was ripped open. I was crouched in my attic, just a foot or so from the access, so I could try to stop them if they tried to climb up. From my vantage point, all I could see was from about their knee down. They were wearing dirty blue jeans with frayed cuffs and worn work boots. After a few seconds of looking in the closet, they stepped away, and I heard a loud crash come from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. The scream crashes and clatters as things were thrown around and furniture was knocked over. I stayed crouched in the attic. I had left my cell phone when I ran for the closet, and I wasn't certain I could climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped, and I started counting slowly. When I reached 1,000, I decided it was safe enough to climb down and call the police. The first thing I noticed when I exited the closet was the intruder had flipped my bed over, I assume in an attempt to find me. That was the loud noise I had heard after he stepped away from the closet. I couldn't find my cell phone, so I went to the landline by the bed and called the police. I waited in my room until I heard them call out from downstairs. The first floor was a mess, but I had expected that. Chairs had been knocked over, the sofa had been flipped, all the books, pictures, and knickknacks I had on my shelves were strewn across the floor. The cupboards in the kitchen had been opened, and all the boxed and canned foods had been thrown to the ground. As far as I could tell, though, the only thing missing was a single knife out of the wooden block in my kitchen. The police checked the house from top to bottom. They found that the side door had been forced open by something like a crowbar. They also found a few cigarette butts along the fence line, along with some foil and an empty bent tube, which the police said people often used to smoke meth, so they think he had been watching my house for a while. I realized that he must have been out there smoking a cigarette when I got home. They collected up the evidence and told me I should stay with family or friends that night and get the door fixed as soon as possible. I opted to just not sleep. I moved a shelf over to block the broken door and spent the next couple hours cleaning up. I would often go to the window with a flashlight and shine it along the fence line where the police found the cigarette butts and foil, but I didn't see anything. The next day, I called to have the door fixed and motion lights installed at the back and sides of my house. I ran a phone cable up into the attic and added a landline. I never wanted to be stuck up there without a phone again. Nothing else happened at that house, though. I lived there another 3 years without incident. One more precaution I took was practicing getting out of my bed, going to the closet, and climbing into the attic as quickly and quietly as possible. I even kept at it when I moved, except now I go to a crawl space at the back of the closet instead of the attic. I try not to think about what would have happened if I had been a bit slower getting to the attic, or if he had gone in the bathroom at the end of the hall first. That one is wild. They're so smart for taking so many precautions afterwards. I mean, and for going up into the attic to begin with. I feel like if I heard somebody running in my house and they weren't supposed to be there, I guess I don't know what I would do unless I was in one of these situations. But knowing myself, I feel like I would just scream bloody murder and get myself found. I would cry. How did they hoist themselves up into the attic so quickly? I guess that fight or flight kicked in. And obviously the person was on drugs, but who knows what they would have done. They took one of the knives from the kitchen. That part is so eerie, because obviously they were going to hurt them. That's one of my biggest fears is a hole